And we all work in alliance and coalition with one another, even when various organizations around Alabama and regionally and nationally may not have the same exact goals and objectives, but we know that we can achieve more working collectively for shared outcomes, for shared goals. Um, I've heard some words that folks may not be familiar with, and because we are a little compressed on time, I just want to get a read from the room. If everyone, what is a just transition? What does that mean to you? Are you familiar with that term? The concept being that, I mean, you've heard of the Green New Deal, along the same lines, is that by addressing our changing climate, we can actually create economic development engines with green jobs while addressing climate issues, improving our public health, our air, our water, our land, and especially in our cities. So that's, when we talk about just transition, it's transitioning away from fossil fuels to more clean energy sources. And I'm really glad that Patricia brought up SWEET's program with weatherization, because a lot of people don't necessarily think about solar panels are sexy and renewable energy sources, but there's so much that can be achieved by reducing our demand on our natural resources. Alabama has a history and a culture of exploiting our natural resources. Cindy brought up our amazing biodiversity. We've lost so much, and yet we still have so much left. And I don't think there's any argument, or very little argument in Alabama, that we have a very special place, and we want to protect our home. So can y'all talk a little bit more about what you see as being the current or emerging threats to environmental justice, or what you're doing as an organization to address these concerns?
Like when you talk about in the Black Belt with the sewage, where now it's just now getting attention. It's been years and years and years and years of raw sewage coming up in people's yards and their homes, and there's not the urgency because again it's bodies. So I would say the pressing issue in my perspective, and I would just speak for SWEET, is environmental racism, and it's with our Latin American neighbors as well. Not the urgency to fix an issue. Like, I'm not even talking about the greed of the money and you're profiting off of people's health. It's just the care of restoring people to where they were and making them better. That's just not there. To me, that's the pressing issue in Alabama. We can find a way to actually care about folks and actually help them, because you can't, once somebody's gone, you can't bring them back. And once you get diagnosed with something that's incurable, you can't fix it, but you can at least pay medical bills. You can at least move them from that area. You can at least buy their property at a property value that would be if it was in Mountain Brook, like give them the Mountain Brook prices. Even though they can't resell it, but you can at least do things in you can use equitable ways to restore and remediate, not just moving soil, so.
Black Belt. And so when it comes to the way environmental injustice and environmental racism plays out in the water sector, mostly through our infrastructure, access to sanitation, proper sanitation, and access to affordable drinking water. And most of the history of traditional environmental groups has not necessarily been playing in that arena. We've focused more on how do we keep our water clean that's in our rivers, so the pollution coming into it, which is still part of that, right? It's still part of our drinking water being clean and being more affordable. Because if it's dirty, the dirtier it gets in the river, the harder it is to treat, the more expensive it is to treat, the more expensive it's going to be for people to get it to their homes or to pay for it from their utilities. So that is a piece of that, but our thinking has usually focused on that water, natural water systems, natural water infrastructure, the rivers and streams. Thanks to activists like Catherine Coleman Flowers and others who have really raised the issue of sanitation in the Black Belt. And it's not really exclusive to the Black Belt. A lot of rural areas have sanitation inequities. The geology, though, the problematic geology is exclusive in the Black Belt, which makes it even more challenging to solve those problems. So wastewater infrastructure is where we're seeing that sort of intersection of environmental injustice and environmental racism. And then also emerging contaminants in our waterways, which gets back to that affordability. We are now seeing, we're following this. Thankfully, there is some attempts to try and get a better situation for the infrastructure through the bipartisan infrastructure law. So the Alabama Rivers Alliance and many partners are looking at following that money as it comes into our state in various ways it's coming in, and making sure that that communities know about it, and it's getting to communities that need it. And we're, I'm not gonna say by any means that we're unique or leading. There's a whole bunch of different groups working on this. There's academic institutions we're engaging with that have been doing research on how do you do septic properly in the Black Belt, where it will work. And so we're engaging with all of these different groups and trying to figure out where our role as an advocacy organization is to make sure that the Alabama Department of Environmental Management is, doing their job to.
Okay, well, that was a great segue to what I wanted to talk about, because I wanted to go in that direction. Division, the culture wars, rising fascism, those, in my opinion, are the emerging themes that are going to be an obstacle to true environmental justice. The EPA defines environmental justice with phrases like meaningful involvement, public participation, and fair treatment, things like that. I sort of take a different approach, which is thinking about the history of this country and the racism and the environmental racism. It requires two things. It requires preventing current and future harm, and then restoring and repairing past harm. And when it comes to repairing past harm, in a way, we're talking about reparations. And follow the thread here. When we're talking about environmental reparations, we get into the culture wars, because when we're talking about, we get lumped in with critical race theory, environmental, social, and governmental goals, ESG, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, all of these hot topics and hot button issues that they, on the other side, our opponents, have weaponized and use as trigger words for the public to get people on their side and score political points. Those things, we're lumped in with that. And so in order for us to be successful, we're actually going to have to be even more united. We can't be divided. We can't let those wedges drive between us and groups doing other types of justice work. We have to all be united. And we know that we're in the minority in the state right now. But if we keep advocating for our beliefs from an authentic place, I believe that we can overcome those obstacles. But that's going to take years of dedication and working in alliance and coalition with one another. James Baldwin said that ignorance allied with power is the greatest threat justice can have, and so that's what we're looking at. We're looking at an ignorant public being manipulated by power-hungry, greedy politicians and corporations, and so that to me is the greatest threat to environmental justice.
So the only question that I have is when we're talking about strategy and speaking the same language. Is there a statewide climate justice or environmental justice work group call that we could be invited to make sure that all of the work that we're all doing is aligned?
Who's got cards? We're all a part of a formation called Alabama for a Green New Deal, which is a hub of a regional movement formation. And so can talk to any one of us about that afterwards. We can give you our info to get you looped in.
We're with the Georgia Green New Deal and the Louisiana, but we haven't tapped into Alabama yet.
Oh, yeah.
So definitely.
Okay.
I will say, I was just in Georgia at the Southern Company shareholders meeting, and we rolled up in the Black Voters Matter van. And so confronting them head on, in your face, that was really fun. I just saw your shirt.
And there is some discussion within Alabama Forward, and I think we all need to figure out how that fits in with Gulf South for Green New Deal groups. There's discussion of having an environmental justice table that has come up a couple of times. So I don't know if we need an additional thing because we're all maxed out, but how do we make that be the same thing?
So we've been in Pritchard, Alabama, working, and I'm so glad that someone from Sweet, because I've been on a call and people keep saying like Sweet, and I'm like, who are they? So glad to meet you. One of the things I'm wondering is the issue of private water boards. And because that is a beast within itself. Oh God, this may be a long conversation afterwards.
It may be.
Okay, and I think that that's the challenge in Pritchard, because they have this private water board. Water bills are slowly going up, they've been going up. Some people have received bills like that are almost
They
$2,000.
had a corruption scandal, didn't
They did,
Yeah.
they did. And so, when you talk about the money that's coming in, or that it'll be expensive to repair these infrastructures that are failing, but I also know within the last 2 decades, I'm thinking, because I'm from Talladega County, that we started seeing a lot of the private water boards, and there's no fight. Like, you just cannot fight, you can't appeal, you know they're not reading meters, you can't prove it. You know, like I remember telling my mom, just put a camera by there, but just put a camera out. And she was just like, it's not gonna work. Like, you can't communicate with her.
So this is true not just in water utilities, but in electrical utilities as well.
Yeah.
And you bring up the concept of, weatherization and how do you improve structures. And, think of the built environment, especially like our homes, residential buildings especially, as an organism, much like the human body. I mean, it all has to be working in concert with one another. And as structures age, maybe you're not taking as good a care of the lungs, the HVAC, as you are the water, or vice versa. And you can't really, you can address one. I'm particularly interested in public schools. I mean, you take care of like an electrical issue or an HVAC issue, but then you've still got mold just because there's a leak in the roof. So you really have to look at these things comprehensively. And environmental justice and sustainability is about thinking about these issues in a way that's more holistic. And as Cindy alluded to earlier, I remember thinking of this, and maybe shouldn't use the phrase this way, but we are part of nature as humans, not trying to just use our natural resources.
Sometimes I think we
It feels like we are.
aliens, but,
Yeah, but I mean, we're all part of this very dynamic system, and need to be aware of that and educate, others about that. So
Kathleen, I wanted
yeah.
to say one more thing for the folks in Pritchard, if it's helpful,
Yeah.
and any other communities. There is, and we worked with Sweet on this in the early days when it came out. During the pandemic, they did create a low-income housing water assistance program, which is a fund to help people pay their water bills. It also can help them get their water cut back on. It's temporarily funded, but there's still money in it, and it's coming through ADECA. And it would be through your community action agency in your communities that would be where you would, which anybody that qualifies for the other assistance programs, I think even like SNAP or any of that, I think it's the same paperwork, so they probably wouldn't have to look it out. And there's been an energy assistance program like HEAT for a long time, but it was shocking to me that it hasn't been a water one. But water bills are just starting to rise. They've always been the lowest bill that everybody had, and now they're starting to rise. So that's a program we're advocating at the national level to try to get permanently funded, and there's some hope that might happen. But that may be just at least a short-term thing.